Hi, so we're with Kate Wylie, Global Vice President of Sustainability at Mars. Hi, Kate.
Hi there.
Joining us from freezing London at the moment. So hopefully we'll sort of sustainability will warm us up a bit. Kate, Mars has a very ambitious sustainability plan. The actual title is Sustainable In-Generation Plan that guides Mars through three interconnected areas, which is healthy planets, thriving people, and nourishing well-being. So to sort of give us a quick understanding of the plan, could you share what you think is most material and sort of interesting in the plan?
Yeah, of course. So thank you very much for inviting me onto this today. So as you said, Mars has their Sustainable in a Generation plan that we launched in 2017. And how we've sort of described this is through these three interconnected areas of healthy planet, thriving people, and nourishing well-being. And each of them has a long-term ambitions, sets of short-term targets, and activities to deliver it. And what we've done is, wherever possible, we've based this on science. So, for example, on climate change, our greenhouse gas targets are all based on what the planet needs and what science says the planet needs. So they're called science-based targets. And then on thriving people, we want to significantly improve the working lives of at least 1 million people across our value chain. And then how do we go about doing this? So if you look at our business, actually most of the impact, 80 to 90% of our impact, is in our supply chain. So that's how we source our raw materials. And so two big highlights there of what we've done is our Palm Positive plan. So this was where we announced last year that we are now deforestation free in our palm oil supply chains, which is a significant step forward for us and for the industry. So that's one thing. And then secondly is our Cocoa for Generations plan, where we're investing over $1 billion in building sustainable and responsible cocoa supply chains.
That's very impressive. And I remember cocoa is quite a major issue, right? I mean, there's all kinds of issues with growing cocoa, with the future, I would say, sustainability of cocoa. And I remember that Mars is doing quite a lot around that. You've mentioned data-driven or science-driven approach, which we hear, I think, more often in terms of sustainability. Can you share some major goals and maybe some interesting case studies that already sort of reflect the progress, the way forward?
Yeah, and let me talk about greenhouse gas emissions, so climate change and packaging, and I'll give you a couple of examples on each of those. So on greenhouse gas emissions, I've already said, that most of our impact is within our supply chain. So what's interesting, if you look at our footprint, so the greenhouse gas impact across our whole business, our whole value chain, actually 80% of that is the supply chain. And then 40% of it is actually deforestation, which is technically called land use change. And so, the importance of building that deforestation-free palm oil is significant through our Palm Positive plan. But actually now what we're looking to do and we're working on is rolling that out to other raw materials as well. So we can start to reduce that 40% focused on deforestation. So that's one thing. Another thing on climate change that's in our operations is we're shifting to renewable energy. And so we plan to have 100% renewables, and actually we're already at 53% of that. So that's about engaging in long-term agreements to help scale up renewable energy. And actually, can I just talk about packaging as well, because this is obviously very important.
Absolutely.
And in 2019, we launched our sustainable packaging plan, which is where we go about looking at how we can reduce what unnecessary packaging we have in our portfolio. So that's things like lightweighting, removing layers, but also looking at reuse models. So we do that. Then when we have packaging remaining, we have to design that to be recyclable. So that might be through shifting to different materials or making it much more simplified, the packaging, so it can be easily recycled. And then we're also partnering with others to invest to close the loop, to help scale up the waste management infrastructure. And so what we want and plan to have is 100% of our packaging reusable, recyclable or compostable by 2025. And so towards the end of last year, I'll give you some ideas of what we launched last year actually, is we launched a reuse program in pet food. So that means people can send back the packaging and then it gets refilled again. So it's a reuse program. We've been buying recycled content to go into our packs, and then also we've launched a recyclable pouch. So it's mono material, so single plastic material for the microwavable food. Rice pouches, and this is a big deal because this is the first time this has been done, and so it's at the moment we're really focused on new packaging innovations that either reduce our plastic and packaging or enable them to be recycled.
And that's it's widely discussed in Israel as well, the whole question of packaging. And you've mentioned sort of the relationship with the consumer. The reusable, for instance, is a challenge for the industry, I think, as a whole. How did you, what was the reaction that you received from consumer? Was it positive? Are you optimistic in that regard?
Yes, I think absolutely it's positive. It's through an initiative called Loop, and they've had a great reaction to it. What we're doing at the moment is getting lots of different innovations out there to then start to see what scales. So then now's the crunch time in seeing, do we go from the niche, very interested consumer to more that mass consumption through these different types of models?
Interesting. And at a certain point, there were talks about eatable packages. Do you see it still as something that we might see in the near future, or was it sort of dropped in a way?
Well, packaging provides a function. And so for packaging, that we use, it enables the sort of product inside to be sort of protected, and then from a quality and sort of health and safety point of view, and then also able to stay in the right stability, on the shelves. And so lasts there, so then consumers can come and find the product. So whether edible packaging would work for something like our products in the future, I'm not sure. There's still, we're definitely looking at multiple different types of materials. But I think it is quite interesting. Where it's been shown to maybe work more are things like when you've seen long distance running, and then marathon runners can just put a whole sort of shot of both the water and the packaging in their mouths, and you're not seeing them then, further down the road throwing that packaging out, because it's got a much shorter shelf life that's needed for that.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's all those ideas change the way we look at how we consume, how we eat, and the transition here, I think, is fascinating to break through the old conventions, as you might say. What would you say is critical, the critical keys for success? So what is unique to Mars in its approach if we look at the overall sustainability effort and ambitious goals? 2025 is around the corner.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So Mars, people may not know, but Mars is actually owned by the Mars family still, and it's a sort of purpose-led, family-owned business where they are very, very serious about building long-term value that's focused on financial and non-financial value. And so one of the crucial things I think that's important to embedding sustainability in the company is treating it as you would do financial metrics. So there's this phrase, what gets measured gets managed. And so something that Mars has is what we call the Mars Compass, which is a set of both financial and non-financial metrics that guides the board, enable the Mars management team and leadership team to sort of set direction for the company, and then used in our day-to-day decision making and embedded in the business. And these are across 4 quadrants: 2 financial, 2 non-financial, and one of them is called positive societal impact and has our greenhouse gas targets and our thriving people targets and so on within that. So, I mean, that's where I think, you really then can sort of embed sustainability in a business and treat it as you would do any other company goal and metric, is when you have something similar to that type of operating model.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good answer to anybody who we all know as professionals, as part of the sustainability community, who is still fighting or struggling, I would say, with those who think that it's greenwash, it's not necessarily a real commitment forward. And as you said, once things are measured, once things are sort of under strict goals with deadlines, I think that's a real sort of showcasing of commitment and moving forward. Did COVID affect sort of the sustainability efforts in any way? Did it boost it? Did it sort of maybe take it backwards? What's your take on COVID and sustainability?
Yeah, so I think it's obviously impacted the sort of the operations. It's absolutely not impacted our ambitions. So our goals haven't shifted in any way. And in fact, in some ways, it's deepened them. So because what I think it's done is a few things. It's exposed some of the sort of systemic inequitability that are across our society, and that has driven more focus for us on looking at the sort of vulnerable in our supply chains. And let me give you an example on packaging, actually, that's much sort of closer to home. Is we had plans to launch packaging innovations into markets, and unfortunately, because our R&D teams couldn't physically get into factories to do the testing, because our associate safety was number one, and so people in factories were only those sort of that actually absolutely had to be there. So any sort of R&D innovation was paused for a while, and people couldn't get into the factories to test new packaging innovations. So what they did instead was use that time to sort of virtually brainstorm around more innovation. And so, now when they've come out and they've gone back into the factories to be able to test, actually we've got more innovation there, and there's much more focus around what we could do. So I think, some innovations did get delayed getting launched, but actually now we've got a better plan, and it's more sort of focused as well. So that's on packaging. But I think, there are some sort of significant challenges, that we're facing. If you ask me what the 3 big challenges are, I think it's obviously climate change. COVID is a huge impact, but the impact of climate change, could it be even stronger? So there's climate change, sustainable packaging. You said you experience it in Israel too. This is a sort of global issue, and it needs to be addressed. And then also, the knock-on effects of COVID for the vulnerable in our supply chains, and how we continue to build these sustainable supply chains, particularly with the smallholder farmers, but are doing so now, also addressing the impact of COVID.
Yeah, so we get the positive, and we definitely have the challenges here. And I agree that if you could, and I think it's often talked, and I think we all try to do it, to push the stress a bit aside and to use the relatively more quiet sort of time that we can have at work to dive into, let's say, complex problems. And it seems as if there are some positive aspects to that. To wrap up, I read a fascinating interview with you about gender equality and parenthood and a demanding job. I think the author was kind of said that you could help with giving a master plan of how to combine those two things. And one thing that I really found fascinating is that Mars provides a kind of a parenthood mentor or advisor of how to combine between work and parenthood. So kind of wrapping up on that, what would be your take and advice on that?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that in order to build a more equitable working future, where between men and women here I'm talking about, you need to think about parenting rather than just mothers. And so for example, in the UK, actually Mars has now announced that they give all parents the same amount of paid leave when a child is born, whether you're a mother or a father, and from whatever type of relationship you're in. So taking those types of steps where you have this sort of equitable type of leave dynamics between men and female is very, very important. But my advice would be overall is to work out what works for you. So no one, there isn't a book on, this is the way you have to bring up children. There isn't that, for starters, but then also this is the way you then have to balance your life. And so, something that somebody gave to me was a piece of advice on finding your balance. So what works for you? Like, how much time do you want to spend with your children? How much time do you want to be in work? How much time do you want to be with your family? How much time do you want to be with your friends? And sort of literally write it down to work out, what is your balance, and how do you want to, live your working life? And then ask for it. If you don't ask, you don't get. And I find so often that people feel like they can't ask, for example, for flexible working, because it's never been done before. But I think that is the only way the future is going to work, where you can have this sort of dual career household and parents get the right balance between sort of family and working life that they need. And I think that is a good thing that will come out of COVID. I mean, this is my personal belief, but the COVID has shown that people don't need to be in an office every day, sitting at a desk, clocking in from a certain hour to a certain hour. You can work from home some days, you can have flexible working and manage your family and working life in more of a sort of symbiotic relationship, and it works. And so I believe that will truly unlock the sort of balance between mothers and fathers, women and men in the workplace.
Excellent, very sound advice, and I would echo the instead of guilt, let's think about fulfillment and purpose, and be sort of happy with what we have. Excellent. We could go on. Thank you for a fascinating conversation. Let's do another one on parenthood. I think there will be a high demand for that in Israel. So thank you, Kate.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.